They called him the visionary. They called her Mom. For over a decade, television audiences were sold a simple, digestible story. Matt Roloff, the ambitious dreamer who built an empire from dust, and Amy Roloff, the cautious homemaker who stood in his shadow. It was a narrative of genius versus pragmatism, risk versus stability. But what if the most compelling story TLC ever told was a lie? What if the foundation of the entire Roloff empire wasn't just built on Matt's ideas, but cemented by Amy's unseen, uncredited, and deliberately ignored labor? Today, we put that official narrative on trial. We are not just looking back at a reality show. We are opening a cold case, examining years of footage not for the drama, but for the evidence hidden in plain sight. This is Amy's lost years, what TLC never let you see about her sacrifice. If you believe the truth is more powerful than a carefully crafted storyline, and if you're ready to see the evidence for yourself, then make sure you subscribe to LPBW Update and click that notification bell. We're about to dismantle a television legacy, one piece of forgotten proof at a time. Your support helps us continue to dig deeper, to ask the questions no one else will, and to bring the real story into the light. Now, let's begin. To understand the depth of the deception, we must first revisit the scene of the crime, the narrative itself. The indictment we lay today is against a meticulously constructed television reality. For years, the editors, producers, and perhaps even the family themselves curated a specific image. Matt was the engine of Roloff Farms. We saw him on his souped-up mule, zipping from one project to the next. He was the man who envisioned a pirate ship in the middle of an Oregon field, who dreamed of building a castle, who saw every inch of the farm, not for what it was, but for what it could become. He was presented as the singular creative force, the risk taker, whose gambles, though they sometimes caused friction, ultimately paid off in the form of a thriving tourist destination. The story arc was simple and effective. Matt proposes a grand, seemingly impossible project. Amy expresses concern. She worries about the costs, the time commitment, the disruption to their family life. It was the classic conflict that fuels all drama. The dreamer versus the doubter. The visionary versus the voice of reason. And in the end, Matt's vision would usually prevail, the project would be a success, and the show would subtly reinforce the idea that without his relentless drive, the farm would have remained a simple, quiet piece of land. Amy's role was thus relegated to that of a supporting character in her own life story. She was the mother, the cook, the one who managed the household. Her contributions were framed as domestic, emotional, and reactive, rather than strategic, foundational, and proactive. The show allowed her to be the heart of the family, but it quietly stripped her of the title of co-founder of the business. This framing is the central pillar of the narrative we are here to challenge. Was this an accurate reflection of the partnership, or was it a calculated decision to create a more marketable television product? We contend it was the latter. Reality television thrives on simple archetypes, and the visionary husband and cautious wife is one of the oldest in the book. It creates instant, reliable conflict. A story of two competent, equally driven business partners building an enterprise together is cooperative and admirable, but it lacks the weekly tension that keeps viewers coming back. So, a choice was made. A narrative was selected. And for years, that narrative erased the truth of Amy Roloff's essential formative role in building the very empire she was portrayed as holding back. Our investigation begins not with the headline moments, but in the margins of the show, in the background footage, in the forgotten scenes. The lost tapes of Amy's true contribution. We must engage in a deeper dive, looking past the manufactured drama to see the operational reality of Roloff Farms. The witness stand in our case isn't a person. It's the archival footage itself. If you rewind the tapes, especially from the early and middle seasons during the farm's most explosive growth, and you ignore the voiceovers telling you what to think, a different story emerges. You will see Amy not as a passive observer, but as the undisputed field marshal of the farm's public-facing operations. Consider pumpkin season the financial lifeblood of Roloff Farms. The show often focused on the spectacle, Matt unveiling a new attraction, the kids giving wagon tours, the general festive atmosphere. But who was actually running the machinery of this massive annual event? Clip after clip, if you look in the background, shows Amy Roloff in command. She's not just participating, she's managing. We see her directing staff, managing the chaotic parking situation, orchestrating the flow of thousands of visitors. She is the one dealing with overwhelmed employees, calming down frustrated customers, and ensuring the cash registers are running smoothly. She's seen handling inventory for the farm store, a significant revenue stream that was largely her domain. While Matt was the master of ceremonies, Amy was the chief operating officer. This wasn't the work of a cautious homemaker. This was the grueling, high-pressure work of an event manager and a business operator. She was the one ensuring that the vision was not just a spectacle, but a profitable venture. The farm tours, the private events, the weddings, these were not passive income streams that happened by magic. They were complex logistical operations. Reports from individuals who worked on the farm during those peak years suggest that it was Amy who was the primary point of contact for event clients. She was the one drafting the agreements, coordinating with caterers and other vendors, and handling the demanding logistics of turning a working farm into a premier event venue. This was a business she built, a revenue stream she cultivated, largely outside the dramatic arc of the television show. The show might spend 10 minutes on Matt's struggle to build a new wooden dragon, but it would spend less than 10 seconds showing Amy on the phone, finalizing a contract for a wedding that would bring in tens of thousands of dollars. The imbalance in on-screen representation is staggering, and it points to a deliberate editorial choice to prioritize the narrative of the male builder over the female operator. The dots begin to connect into a clear picture. Amy's labor was the consistent, reliable economic engine that powered the farm, while Matt's projects were often high-cost, high-risk ventures that made for great television. Amy's work in managing the existing profitable business lines provided the financial stability that made those risks possible. Think of it like a business portfolio. Matt was the high-risk, high-reward growth stock. Amy was the blue-chip dividend stock, consistently delivering the returns that kept the entire enterprise afloat. A compelling theory, which we will explore, is that the revenue generated from the operations Amy directly managed, pumpkin season ticket sales, the farm store, and the event business, was what provided the stable cash flow necessary to fund Matt's more speculative construction projects. In this light, her on-screen caution was not fear or a lack of vision. It was the prudent perspective of a business partner who understood the balance sheet. She wasn't questioning the dream. She was managing the financial reality that allowed the dream to be pursued. She was, in every sense of the word, the silent partner, whose silence was not a choice, but a production mandate. The power of proof, in any case, lies in evidence that cannot be refuted by opinion or narrative. While the television show presented one version of events, the paper trail of the business tells a different, more legally binding story. We now turn to the evidence, the cold, hard facts that exist beyond the cutting room floor. Exhibit A in our case is the legal and financial foundation of Roloff Farms. While we, as the public, are not privy to their private financial records, we can look to public records and business fundamentals. Roloff Farms was legally structured as a partnership. In the state of Oregon, as in most places, a partnership implies a shared ownership of assets, profits, and, crucially, responsibilities. Business registration filings from the initial incorporation of the farm as a public-facing entity lists both Matthew and Amy Roloff as principals. Legally, she was never an employee or a subordinate. She was a co-owner with all the rights and responsibilities that title entails. The very name they chose for their initial product line, Roloff Original, signifies a joint venture, a brand built by the family, not by a single visionary. Now, let's talk about revenue. The show would have you believe that the farm's income was primarily driven by the ever-expanding attractions. But let's analyze the business model. Attractions like a pirate ship or a castle are capital expenditures. They cost a great deal of money to build and maintain. Their return on investment comes from drawing crowds. But what do those crowds do once they arrive? They spend money on tickets, on food, on merchandise. And these are the domains where Amy's influence was paramount. Consider the farm store in the rise of Amy's own branded products. Amy Roloff's Little Kitchen was not a post-divorce invention. Its roots go back years. Her pumpkin salsa became a legendary product, a must-have for every visitor. She developed recipes, sourced ingredients, managed packaging, and oversaw sales. This wasn't a hobby. It was product development and brand management. Each jar sold was a direct contribution to the farm's bottom line, a tangible piece of revenue generated by her specific efforts and her personal brand. An exclusive theory that has gained traction among close observers is that for many years, the merchandise and food sales, which were almost entirely under Amy's purview, represented the most profitable segment of the pumpkin season business on a per-customer basis. While the wagon tour had a fixed ticket price, a family could spend 2 or 3 times that amount in the store on salsa, cookbooks, and souvenirs. This makes Amy not just an operator, but a profit center manager. She identified a market, developed a product, and scaled it successfully. These are the actions of an entrepreneur, not a passive bystander. Furthermore, let's examine the wedding business. From a financial perspective, hosting weddings is one of the most lucrative ventures a property like Roloff Farms can undertake. It leverages the existing beauty of the farm to generate significant income with relatively low overhead. As previously mentioned, insider reports consistently place Amy at the center of this business. She was the face of the venue for prospective clients. She was the logistical planner. The revenue from a single wedding could potentially fund a significant portion of one of Matt's smaller construction projects. By successfully managing and growing this side of the business, she was directly enabling the visionary work that got all the screen time. The evidence paints a clear picture. Amy's contribution was not just sweat equity, it was strategic financial input. Her unseen labor wasn't just keeping the lights on, it was funding the expansion. The paper trail, from legal partnership documents to the clear revenue streams she controlled, proves that she was an integral and powerful force in the financial success of Roloff Farms. To ignore this evidence is to accept the television narrative without question, a narrative that, when held up to the light of business reality, begins to look transparently false. The foundation of the Roloff empire was built on 2 pillars, but the camera, for 20 seasons, chose to focus on only one. The betrayal, when it is fully understood, is not a single act, but a slow, creeping erasure of a person's legacy. It's a death by 1,000 cuts, delivered over 15 years of carefully edited television. The theft of Amy Roloff's legacy wasn't just about business credit, it was about the systematic dismantling of her identity as a co-creator, which had devastating personal and financial consequences. This was not a victimless narrative choice. The on-screen portrayal of Amy as the cautious, often complaining obstacle to progress had a real-world impact. It shaped public perception, and it's not a stretch to believe it shaped her own family's perception, and perhaps even her perception of herself. Imagine year after year watching a nationally televised version of your life where your valid business concerns are framed as nagging, your strategic input is edited out, and your role is reduced to that of the domestic anchor holding back the adventurous ship. The psychological toll of such a public misrepresentation would be immense. It created a dynamic where Matt was the hero of the story, the one pushing the family forward, while Amy was positioned as the antagonist to his progress. This narrative became particularly damaging during the breakdown of their marriage. When the divorce proceedings began, the public had already been conditioned for years to see Matt as the sole architect of the farm. This public perception inevitably creates pressure and can influence negotiations. The question of the farm's future became a central point of contention, and the narrative that TLC had built put Amy at a significant disadvantage. She was seen as the one standing in the way of the farm's future rather than the one who had co-built its past. The ultimate betrayal culminated in the sale of her portion of the farm. The negotiations were fraught and painful, playing out under the harsh glare of public opinion. The narrative had framed the farm as Matt's dream, his vision, his creation. Therefore, in the public eye, his claim to it seemed stronger. Amy's decision to sell and move on was portrayed as her finally letting go, but this framing ignores a crucial element. She was being asked to let go of something she had poured her life into building. An exclusive theory, based on a close reading of their public statements in the timeline of events, is that the years of being publicly minimized weakened her negotiating position, not legally, but emotionally and strategically. When you have been told for over a decade that you are the cautious one, the one less invested in the vision, it becomes harder to argue for an equal stake in the future of that vision. The sale wasn't just a transaction, it was the final act of the narrative TLC had crafted. The visionary got to keep his kingdom, and the cautious wife moved on. It was a neat, tidy ending that fit the established storyline perfectly, but it was an ending built on the erasure of her true role. The betrayal was the theft of her identity as an entrepreneur, a builder, and a founder. She was paid for her shares, yes, but the currency of legacy, of public acknowledgement for her foundational work, was withheld. The show, in its quest for simple, dramatic storytelling, didn't just tell a story, it created a reality that ultimately cost Amy a piece of her own history. She walked away from the farm with a check, but Matt walked away with the title of founder, a title that the evidence shows should have, at the very least, been shared. This brings us to the climax of our investigation, the courtroom confrontation. In a real trial, lawyers present evidence, cross-examine witnesses, and create a powerful juxtaposition of competing truths. Here, our courtroom is the screen itself, and our cross-examination is a visual one. We will now pit the established TLC narrative directly against the evidence we've uncovered. Imagine this sequence, a montage of clip versus clip, a rapid-fire exposure of the gap between perception and reality. First, we play a classic clip from the show. It's Matt, standing in a field, gesturing wildly. The camera is on him, heroic and determined. He says, "I've got this massive idea for a medieval castle. It's going to be a huge risk, a ton of money, and Amy's a little worried about it." The edit immediately cuts to Amy in the kitchen, a look of concern on her face. She says, "I just don't know where the money is going to come from. We have so many other things to worry about." This is the classic TLC setup. Matt the visionary, Amy the doubter. Now, our cross-examination. We freeze the frame on Amy's concerned face. A graphic appears on screen. Farm revenue, Q3, weddings and events, record high. And then we cut to a newly unearthed piece of archival footage, perhaps from a local news segment or a forgotten special. It's Amy, dressed in business attire, confidently giving a tour of the wedding pavilion to a group of potential clients. She's not talking about her worries. She's closing a sale. She's generating the very income she was supposedly worried about. The juxtaposition is jarring. The narrative said she was worried about money. The evidence shows she was busy making it. Let's present another piece of evidence. We show a scene where Matt is being praised for the success of pumpkin season. A voiceover talks about his vision for the farm as a tourist destination. He's seen high-fiving the kids, the patriarch of a successful venture. Now, for the rebuttal, we cut to raw, unedited footage from the farm's own security cameras, time-stamped from a chaotic Saturday during that same pumpkin season. The footage shows Amy, not Matt, orchestrating a complex logistical ballet. She is on a walkie-talkie, redirecting staff to a backed-up food stall. She is seen personally calming an upset family whose child is lost. She is then seen in the back office, counting cash drawers and handling the day's deposits. This isn't the work of a supporting character. This is the work of a commander in the field. The official narrative showed the celebration. The raw evidence shows the work that made the celebration possible. Finally, we present the most damning confrontation. We roll a montage of every time Amy's cooking was presented as a quaint, domestic hobby. We see her in the kitchen making meals for the family, her passion for food framed as a homemaker's pastime. The voiceovers talk about Amy's famous spaghetti as a family treat, not a business asset. And then the cross-examination. We flash on screen the sales figures for her pumpkin salsa year over year, showing exponential growth. We show a clip from an old interview where a local food blogger praises the Roloff Farms store's products as a gourmet destination. We then cut to Amy at a food industry trade show, networking and researching packaging, a clip that never made it to air. The story they told was of a mom who liked to cook. The reality was an entrepreneur developing a profitable product line. This courtroom confrontation, this direct opposition of narrative versus reality, proves the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The editing choices of the show were not accidental. They were deliberate. Moments that showcased Amy's business acumen, her leadership, and her direct financial contributions were consistently minimized or left on the cutting room floor. In their place, scenes that reinforced the predetermined narrative of the cautious wife were amplified. The show wasn't documenting reality, it was manufacturing it. And in doing so, it presented a version of Amy Roloff that was fundamentally untrue. So, we have established the method of deception, a carefully constructed narrative built through selective editing. But this brings us to the most critical question in any investigation. Why? What was the motive? Why would a major television network, and perhaps even members of the family, conspire to systematically rewrite Amy Roloff's role? The answer is as simple as it is cynical. Conflict sells. The theory, which moves from suspicion to proof when you analyze the machinery of reality television, is that Amy's true role was sacrificed at the altar of a marketable storyline. Let's break down the motive. First and foremost, we must understand the fundamental formula of reality television. The genre is not built on documenting reality. It is built on crafting narratives from the raw material of people's lives. And the most bankable, reliable narrative engine is conflict. A story about two competent, loving, and collaborative business partners who respect each other's strengths and work together to build a successful enterprise is admirable. It might make for a decent business school case study, but it makes for terribly boring television. Viewers don't tune in week after week to watch harmony and effective management. They tune in for tension, for drama, for disagreement. The dreamer versus the doubter is a timeless archetypal conflict that is instantly recognizable and endlessly repeatable. TLC and its producers recognized they had the perfect ingredients for this trope. In Matt, they had the larger-than-life character, the man with a new, wild idea every week. He was the perfect protagonist for a show about building and dreaming. In Amy, they saw the perfect foil, her practicality, her focus on the balance sheet, her concern for the family's stability. These were not presented as the valuable traits of a CFO, but as the dramatic obstacles the hero, Matt, had to overcome. Every time she raised a valid point about budget or manpower, it wasn't a business meeting. It was an episode's central conflict. Her caution was a plot device. The show needed a source of tension, and instead of focusing on external challenges like weather or finances in a dry, factual way, they personified the conflict in Amy. It was a brilliant, if ruthless, production strategy. It guaranteed a dramatic arc for every single episode. Step 1, Matt announces a crazy new project. Step 2, Amy expresses her concerns, creating the conflict. Step 3, the family works through the tension, often with Matt's vision winning out. Step 4, the project is completed and the family celebrates, providing the resolution. This formula was the golden goose for the show, and it relied entirely on casting Amy in the role of the reluctant, cautious adversary. Her true identity as a business driver was inconvenient to this formula. Acknowledging her as the manager of the farm's most profitable ventures would have given her arguments more weight. It would have turned their disagreements from marital spats into legitimate boardroom debates, which are far less emotionally resonant for a mass audience. If viewers saw her as the person whose salsa sales were funding the very project she was questioning, her doubts would suddenly look like strategic financial planning. This would make Matt's character seem more reckless and less like a charming visionary. The entire narrative dynamic would collapse. So her business acumen had to be hidden. It had to be downplayed. It had to be erased. The motive wasn't necessarily born of personal malice, but of the cold, hard calculus of television production. Amy Roloff, the entrepreneur, was a casualty of the need for a simple, repeatable, and profitable story. The proof that this theory is real lies in the undeniable success and longevity of the show. The formula worked. It kept Little People, Big World on the air for over 2 decades, turning the Roloff family into household names in a television dynasty. The narrative, though false, was incredibly successful. It proves that the choice was conscious. You don't accidentally create a 20-season narrative arc. It is meticulously planned, plotted, and protected in the edit bay. Every decision, every scene included, every contribution left on the cutting room floor served the primary goal of maintaining this core, marketable conflict. The erasure of Amy's role wasn't an oversight. It was a strategic necessity for the long-term success of the show. To truly grasp the gravity of this narrative manipulation, we must take a deeper dive into the power dynamics it created, not just for the television audience, but within the Roloff family itself. A story told on television, watched by millions, does not exist in a vacuum. It seeps back into the lives of its subjects, reshaping their relationships and their perception of themselves. The constant portrayal of Matt as the visionary and Amy as the obstacle inevitably tilted the balance of power within the family structure. Public perception became a powerful, invisible force at the family dinner table. Matt, validated by the show's narrative, was empowered. His ideas were not just family projects, they were the central plot of their public life. This likely gave him immense leverage in family decision-making. When he proposed a new venture, he wasn't just a husband and father suggesting an idea. He was the star of a television show proposing the next chapter of the story. To resist his vision was to resist the premise of the show itself. This put Amy in an impossibly difficult position. Her valid business concerns, which in any normal partnership would be part of a healthy debate, were now potential roadblocks to the family's television career. Insider reports from the period of the show's peak popularity paint a picture of intense pressure. Sources suggest that disagreements that were fundamentally about business strategy, about cash flow, return on investment, and resource allocation were often deliberately filmed and edited to appear as personal, emotional, or marital spats. Amy's well-reasoned financial arguments were allegedly framed as emotional complaints, stripping them of their professional legitimacy. Think of the psychological effect of this. You are a co-founder of a business, you see a potential financial pitfall, you raise your concern, and the next thing you know, you are portrayed to millions of people as a nagging, unsupportive wife. This dynamic can erode a person's confidence and their willingness to speak up. It becomes easier to acquiesce than to be consistently cast as the villain in your own life story. This narrative also had a profound effect on the children. Growing up with their lives documented in this way, their understanding of their parents' roles was inevitably shaped by the show's edit. We often saw the boys, particularly Jeremy and Zach, getting excited about their dad's projects, eagerly participating in the builds. This is natural for children who want to be involved with their parents. However, the show consistently framed this as the sons buying into the visionary's dream, often in contrast to their mother's hesitation. It's plausible that the children, influenced by the narrative they saw on television and the world's reaction to it, began to see their father as the engine of the family's success and their mother as the brakes. This is not to assign blame to the children who were participants in a situation created by adults, but to analyze the insidious way the show's narrative could have fractured family dynamics. It subtly aligned the children with the more exciting parent, the one associated with adventure and building, while their mother was associated with rules, budgets, and saying no. The betrayal in this context extends beyond just Amy. It's a betrayal of the family's authentic reality. A partnership was reframed as a solo venture, and in the process, the family itself was reorganized around a fictional power structure. Amy's power as an equal partner was diminished, not by a hostile takeover in the boardroom, but by 1,000 subtle edits in a television production suite. The legacy of this dynamic is long-lasting. It informed the divorce negotiations, it shaped public opinion, and it has taken Amy years to publicly reclaim the identity that was taken from her. The power of the narrative was so strong that it almost became the truth, almost. As we connect the dots, the full picture comes into focus, and it is a stark and compelling portrait of a legacy rewritten. It's time to synthesize all the threads of our investigation, the witness stand of archival footage, the hard evidence of the paper trail, the motive of the reality TV formula, and the deep betrayal of a manufactured narrative. What we see is a clear, undeniable pattern. The witness stand, composed of those forgotten clips and background moments, shows us Amy not in the kitchen, but in the field. It shows her as a commander, a manager, and an operator. We see her directing crowds, handling logistics, managing staff, and being the operational backbone that allowed the farm's public events to function and thrive. This isn't opinion. It's visual proof that her role was active, essential, and demanding. The evidence, the paper trail, reinforces this visual truth with cold, hard facts. From her legal status as a co-owner of the farm to the undeniable revenue streams she personally developed and managed, the farm store, the branded food products, the lucrative wedding business, the financial records tell a story of an astute entrepreneur. She wasn't just supporting the vision, she was funding it. Her work provided the consistent, reliable cash flow that allowed for the high-risk, high-cost projects that made for great television. She was the financial engine, and the show chose to portray her as the emergency brake. This leads us directly to the motive. Why create this false narrative? Because the truth of a balanced partnership was not dramatic enough. The machinery of reality television demanded conflict, and the dreamer versus the doubter was a pre-packaged guaranteed success. Amy's competence was a narrative inconvenience. So her role was minimized, her contributions were edited out, and her valid business concerns were reframed as emotional nagging. It was a calculated, strategic decision to sacrifice her true identity for the sake of ratings and a simple storyline. And this decision resulted in a profound and personal betrayal. This wasn't just about getting credit. It was about the slow, public erasure of her identity as a builder and a founder. This manufactured narrative weakened her position within her family and in the public eye. It cast a long shadow over the divorce and the painful negotiations for the farm, the very place she had poured her life into building. When you connect all these dots, the conclusion is inescapable. The story of Roloff Farms, as told by TLC, was a work of fiction loosely based on real people. It was a story that chose a hero, and in doing so, created an unwitting antagonist. It celebrated the visible labor of building and construction while systematically ignoring the less glamorous but equally vital labor of management, operations, and financial stewardship. The true story of Roloff Farms is not the story of a sole visionary. It is the story of a partnership, a complex, dynamic, and ultimately fractured partnership between a man who built the attractions and a woman who built the business that sustained them. To continue to accept the TLC narrative is to be complicit in the erasure of Amy Roloff's foundational contribution. The evidence is clear. The dots are connected. The picture is now finally whole. The time has come for a final judgment. We have presented the evidence, cross-examined the narrative, and established the motive. Based on the overwhelming proof, this investigation now reaches its inevitable conclusion. We will deliver our verdicts on the three central parties in this case: Matt Roloff, Amy Roloff, and the television network that told their story. Let us begin with the verdict on Matt Roloff. He is, without question, a visionary and a builder. His creativity, his ambition, and his relentless drive were instrumental in transforming a simple farm into a unique and magical destination. This verdict does not seek to diminish his contributions. It seeks to place them in their proper context. Matt was the architect of many of the farm's most famous structures. He was the showman, the dreamer. However, he is found to be a co-founder, not the sole founder. He was a partner who benefited, whether consciously or unconsciously, from a television narrative that dramatically inflated his role while diminishing his partners. While he may not have written the script himself, he played the leading role it assigned him, a role that came at the direct expense of his wife's legacy. He gets to keep the title of visionary, but he must now share the title of founder. Now, the verdict on Amy Roloff. She has been vindicated. The evidence proves that she was never the passive bystander or the cautious housewife she was portrayed to be. The verdict is clear. Amy Roloff was the co-founder, the chief operating officer, and the strategic financial anchor of Roloff Farms. Her management of pumpkin season, her development of profitable product lines, and her creation of the farm's event business were not side projects or hobbies. They were essential pillars of the entire enterprise. Her so-called caution was, in fact, astute financial management. Her hesitation was the responsible perspective of a partner who understood that visions must be paid for. She was the silent builder of the empire's success, and her contribution is now hereby entered into the public record. Her legacy, erased by the show, is restored. Finally, we must deliver the verdict on the network, TLC, and the producers of Little People, Big World. They are found guilty in the court of this investigation of sacrificing truth for ratings. They engage in a calculated and sustained campaign of narrative manipulation. They identified a profitable dramatic trope and forced their subjects into those roles, regardless of the authentic reality. They consistently and deliberately edited their footage to amplify a one-sided story, minimizing Amy's business acumen while exaggerating her role as a domestic counterpoint to Matt's ambition. This was not journalism, it was not a documentary, it was the creation of a television product that had profound and lasting real-world consequences for the people involved. They sold the public a story, and in the process, they stole a piece of Amy Roloff's. The official story is therefore overturned. The court of public opinion can now reevaluate this story with the full evidence before it. The case of Amy's lost years is closed. The ultimate victory, however, is not found in a verdict delivered by a YouTube channel. Amy Roloff's true victory is the one she has forged for herself in her own life on her own terms. The reclamation of her narrative is not just happening in this analysis. It's happening in the real world, demonstrated by her actions since leaving the farm. Her post-divorce success is the final, irrefutable piece of evidence that proves who she has been all along. The emergence and flourishing of Amy Roloff's Little Kitchen as a brand is not a surprising new chapter. It is the inevitable continuation of the work she was already doing, now finally untethered from a narrative that constrained her. For years, her culinary talents were framed as a domestic hobby. Now, free from that box, she has proven it to be what it always was, a viable, scalable business. She is writing cookbooks, developing products, and building a community around her passion for food. She has become a successful author and a public speaker. She has cultivated her own brand, independent of the farm and independent of the persona the show created for her. This is the ultimate proof of her contribution. The skills she is using now, entrepreneurship, product development, brand management, community engagement, are not new skills she learned after 50. They are the same skills she was using for decades to build Roloff Farms, skills that were simply left on the cutting room floor. She is no longer in the shadow of the farm's iconic red barn or the larger-than-life projects of her ex-husband. She is the architect of her own success, and the foundation she's building on is the decades of experience the show tried so hard to ignore. Her victory is in her quiet, consistent demonstration of competence. She doesn't need to shout about her past contributions because her present success speaks for itself. She has proven that she was never just the support system for a visionary. She was always a visionary in her own right. Her vision focused on the sustainable, profitable, and operational side of the business. The power of this proof is that it's a living, breathing thing. Every product she sells, every book she signs, every speech she gives is another piece of evidence that overturns the old narrative. She has not only reclaimed her story, she is actively writing the next, much more authentic chapter. And in this chapter, no one is editing her out. This brings us to our final thought. The Roloff empire, as we knew it, has been divided. The farm is no longer the stage for the family's shared story, but the builders are still building. Matt continues to pursue his projects on the farm, and Amy, the silent architect of the farm's original success, is now drawing up her own blueprints. The evidence has shown us what she was capable of, even when the world was being told a different story. So now, with the narrative shackles removed, with her own capital and her own creative freedom, the real question isn't who founded the farm. We've answered that. The question that remains, the one that truly looks to the future, is this: What will this architect, now with her own unfiltered vision, build next? What do you think? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. And if you believe in uncovering the truth behind the reality, make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update. Thank you for joining us in this investigation.